Alright, hello guys, it's me, Admiral Ellis of the TTO. I remember last week I promised that I'd read Watch this week. Watch is a short little story about 9 pages long, and it has a title page, but with barely anything on it. It doesn't have a chapter page or forward, or even much of exposition at all. It's lacking the headings that I normally have. You just kind of jump right in, so here we go. What box should this go in? I heard Darren ask from the end of the hall. This base had been officially abandoned for 2 months, but there was still a lot of stuff to clean out. We were underneath the heart of the city of Cranston, Rhode Island, and I had just moved away. This one, over here, Sarah advised her. Sarah was about the only one who could keep the inventory straight, and rightfully so. As an AI, she rarely forgot anything. All right, I called. I'm cutting the power in levels 28 and below. I hope we've cleaned that out. It's going to flood fast. There's an empty stasis chamber on level 45, but it's been broken since 07, Sarah replied. Alec, take this box of microchips to the ship. Not worrying about it, then. I pulled the breaker. Then I looked to my right as Alec passed me, an open container in his hands. Stuff within, something was glistening yellow. Why is my pocket watch in a box? I reached in and grabbed it out. I need this. Alec replied with a guilty frown. Sorry, it was on the shelf. Oh, whatever, no harm done. I slipped into one of the few pockets in my dress pants, and returned to pulling items out of Electronics Workshop B. A few minutes I was greeted with a frantic Darren. We're going to be late, she shouted. I hadn't realized it was 6 o'clock already, and she had put the idea in Sarah's head to go to a formal ball in downtown Providence, and now she was dragging me along. Alec was perfectly fine with it. It wasn't his first rodeo. But not only was Sarah not my girlfriend, I could be getting stuff done instead. Levels 12B through 6 hadn't even been touched yet, and the nearly 300 compressors to freeze the soil around the now empty space where Devereaux used to be had to be individually airlifted out. Nonetheless, I relented. Fine, let's go. Does everyone have their stuff? Looking around the concrete hall, I saw Darren pull a dress out of nowhere, and nonchalantly slip it on with Sarah's help. Alec almost take my suit jacket and then find his on the rack, and Sarah finally shimmer into full-color mode. As this was a public event and the year was still barely 2013, a light blue luminescent girl was a bit out of place. Still pulling the creases out of my jacket and brushing dust off my pants, we shut the lights in the base and climbed the stairs, out into the parking lot of the stadium down the street. Mine was the only car in the lot, and we all piled in. A beat-up 1994 Volvo 940. She started up fine and whined as we moved out onto the road. The navy blue sedan cruised down the crowded highway Route 10 into the state capital. Knowing full well that there were never any parking spaces in the city, I wasn't hopeful when I turned off Memorial Boulevard and crossed the river towards the Old Stone Bank. Looking up and down the road told me what I already knew. Every parking spot available was already occupied, and it surely didn't help that we were arriving a bit late. I sighed and cursed my own incompetence, looking above, as if to see an answer. But instead I saw a flash in the sky, with a triangle and rectangle of lights, spinning off in opposite directions through the clouds. I seemed to be the only one who noticed it, and the others were still staring anxiously towards the Old Stone Bank. Not wanting to delay everyone in the car, I turned down the road and stopped in front of the establishment, handed Darren and Alec their tickets, and dismissed them from the vehicle. Sarah stuck with me for 2 reasons. One, she could interface directly with satellite telemetry and tell me where to park, and she was still working bugs out of the way her clothes looked. In other words, she'd been changing her outfit for the last 15 minutes and still hadn't settled on one. I only hoped she'd figure it out by the time I parked, though at this rate she'd have all night. I'd nearly given up as I climbed the hill behind the State House. The only lot back here I knew was a dirt square, and probably muddy after the recent weather. Even then, it was my last shot. To my surprise, the chain guarding it was nowhere to be found, and under the cover of darkness I made a swift turn into the lot with only one other vehicle. At first I thought it was a box truck, being so square and tall, but I soon realized it was a bit too tall for that, and when my headlights glinted off the bronze-plated hemisphere that was the underside, and the bulky engine nacelles, it suddenly struck me that the vehicle I parked next to was not of this world. What on earth? Sarah mumbled. The dress she was fiddling with faded away. I shut the car door and walked to the starship's edge, looking for an identifying feature. There was no light in the parking lot other than the soft shine of traffic on the streets down at the bottom of the hill, rendering my eyes next to useless. Thankfully a car passed by, its lights shining for a brief moment, and I realized to start with that this ship, parked here, was my own. The bat out of hell had not only somehow ended up in this parking lot, but made it here before we did. I was falling into confused thought, trying to think up potential problems with the ship's guidance system for it to have followed us here, but my concentration was broken when my foot got firmly stuck in the parking lot's mud. I lost my balance and caught myself, with my face, on the side of the bat out of hell. "Sarah," I said as I stood back up. "Light?" "Yeah, okay." She had been standing on the opposite side of my car as she noticed her lack of dress, and blushed, fixed that, then raised her hand and began emitting a flashlight beam. As I pored over my own ship for problems, unable to open the door at the moment, she cleared her throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" I was still with clouded thought, and couldn't be bothered to decrypt her speech. "That I didn't have my damn dress on!" she shouted. "You say that like you were naked," I whirled around, speaking on impulse, "and you should be plenty aware of what you were wearing. It's not any of my concern." She fell back into a defensive position, arms crossed. "Well, you were the one who insisted I go full color for tonight. It seems to be your concern. And that's really what you're upset about? What would people say if... Are those mine?" Arms crossed, the light was aimed at the ground, illuminating footprints in the mud. I placed a new one beside them. "They are my footprints. And yours. And they're leading from the bat out of hell down the hill." I was beginning to follow them when Sarah became upset again. Apparently she hadn't burned up all of her bad mood. "Are you carrying your pocket watch with you?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Your pocket is glowing." "What?" I looked down and noticed she was right. The golden watch was sending piercing yellow tendrils of time energy, flowing from my right pocket over to my left, where the bat out of hell was sitting. When they got close to it, they sparked. Oh. Sarah and I came to the same conclusion at the same moment. It's displaced in time. "We should probably avoid it then," she quickly continued. "Yeah, let's go," I concurred. We turned down the hill and began the long walk towards the old stone bank. When we had arrived, she'd finally decided on something. For me, it was beyond decent description, but I felt like it was based on one of Darren's. It looked steampunky, with browns, reds, and tans, and black leather abundant. It kind of spread out at the bottom, forming a bell shape. She was still acting upset about being in color mode. I frankly didn't understand why, but she was. But I was just fine knowing we made it to the ball without further incident. I picked Darren out of the crowd right away, and watched and chuckled as she dragged Alec towards us. The first thing she did was compliment Sarah on her dress, and instruct us to have fun, or else, with a wink. At that moment, Sarah whipped me around to the music's beat, just like that, and got me dancing. Now, I don't like dancing, and I really was only there because Sarah forced me to come along. For an artificial intelligence, she was so emotional, so driven by human desires, that she thought it was great fun. I played along for a good while, but after a bit I slipped away, content to stare out of the front door into the cool December sky, a bit past 8 p.m. and just 2 days from New Year's Eve. But then, in fact right above the building, the lights appeared again, a triangle followed by a rectangle. They swooped away and I, confused, prepared to return inside, but a rustling in the bushes said otherwise. A flash of green, scaly skin was my only warning before Silurian, a humanoid reptile, jumped from the foliage and attacked me. He swung a punch at my face and I ducked. "What the hell do you want?" I let out in a breath. He aimed to kick at me crouched, and I rolled to avoid it, popping up to deliver a blow to the chest. "Admiral Temelio," he said before aiming a right hook which caught me in the forearm and sent me spiraling to the concrete. I sent a kick in the shin and stood as he continued. "You are a protector of the apes. I will kill you so that we may rise again." "You guys are lunatics!" I yelled, and blocked another punch. He lunged, and I sent him tumbling over my knee. Grabbing at me, he tore off my suit jacket, giving me a moment to run. I turned the corner around the building and started aiming for the hill, knowing I kept at least one piece of equipment in the Volvo, not even considering the bat out of hell. But as I passed through the alleyway next to the building, I heard his heavy footsteps on the concrete, and looked back for a fleeting moment to see him readily approaching. When I returned my view forwards, the night shielded a bump in the asphalt, created by a root. As would happen, I tripped, and the Silurian caught up to me instantly. I tried to defend myself, but he arrested my kick, blocked a punch, and then delivered a solid hit to my temple, knocking me out cold. But as my view faded, I saw my watch light again, reaching out tendrils behind me. Sometime later, around 10 o'clock, Sarah shook me awake. I didn't know how she figured out where I was, but Darren and Alec were close behind her, and I smelled the distinct scent of burned flesh. Rising to my feet, I noticed the source of the smell. The Silurian, assumedly the one that attacked me, was lying dead, a gaping, burned hole in his chest. Off to my side on the concrete sat a laser pistol, and I knelt and picked it up. "That's yours," Alec noted. "It's the hole punch." "Yeah," I replied. "I know. But how?" "Why did you shoot him?" Darren griped, looking at the dead reptile. "Well, if I did, it would have been because he was beating the living crap out of me." I rubbed my bruised temple and took my tattered jacket back from Alec, who had picked it up. "But to be honest, I didn't. I didn't even come armed. I don't expect to be assaulted by reptile men when I go out dancing. I'm not sure about you." They both gave me smirks and shrugs. I half expected at least one of them to pull a gun from somewhere. "Well," Sarah said, "something's up. We need to get to the bottom of this." "Should we—" Darren began. "No, stay here," I replied. "We'll come to get you if we need you. You're having a good time anyways, just watch out for aliens." "Can do." Darren smiled and began tugging Alec back towards the door. Now it was Sarah and I and a dead Silurian, alone in the alley. "All right, screw this," Sarah sighed, and her dress vaporized, her form shimmering down to its normal size, and shifting hue back to the standard light blue. "So, the bat out of hell, and now this? Something is very, very odd." "Yeah, and the lights in the sky are tipping me off. Just not sure to what. Lights?" "Walk and talk, I'll explain." Several minutes later, Sarah was data crunching the different kinds of ships that would make that light pattern. In the meantime, we'd climbed Capitol Hill again, and were on the verge of making the turn into the lot, when the rectangle of light swooped low overhead, aiming back towards the old stone bank. "Holy cow," Sarah mumbled. "I hope Darren and Alec are prepared. Should we go back?" "They can handle themselves," I noticed. "We need to keep Whoa! Get down." I pulled her back as I looked into the parking lot and saw two Silurians staring at the sky. "You should not have switched back to light blue. You're like a fluorescent bulb in the middle of the night." She scowled at me, but I ignored it, raised my gun from the edge of the lot, and put a hole straight through the nearest Silurian. The second one noted where I was and began charging, screaming a battle cry. The lights on the side of the PP Type 0 ticked upwards as it vented heat, preparing for the next shot. Come on," I moaned as the reptile charged forwards. Finally the last light came on, and not a moment too soon, I blew his goddamn head off. "So much for interrogating him," Sarah mumbled. "I'm sure there's more where they came from," I retorted. "We just need to get to chasing them down." I got into my car and started it, putting together my plan. As I left the lot, I noted that my shuttle was nowhere to be found. Some time later, I got in and started the bat out of hell. My bat out of hell. It was just Sarah and I. Gregory was still up on the moon in Devereaux. Our goal was to track down the one, or possibly two UFOs, that were somehow linked with the Silurians appearing in Providence. At least, that was my assessment of the situation. Thankfully, Sarah concurred, given the current information. We lifted off with the heavy weight of saved equipment from the base, and headed for Providence. The Silurian ship, or whatever it was, had been hanging around the city for at least the last 4 hours, so there was a good chance it was still there now. But as we closed in, pinging with the best sensors we could on this cloudy night, there was nothing. And then a reading, but it wasn't from Providence. "What the hell?" Sarah eyed her console. "It's coming from the rear. Silurian scout ship." "I knew it!" I shouted as the disc screamed overhead. 3 lights denoting the prongs at the ship's front glinted in the clouds. "Follow that ship!" I gunned the throttle. But as my right hand returned to my side, there was a yellow tendril in my vision. "Oh, what? What's wrong now?" I looked down at my pocket, unaware of the rapidly closing distance on the Silurian vessel. As we came close, the watch sputtered, reaching up for the windshield. A yellow cloak enveloped their ship, trickling back to ours, and then convulsed in a bright flash. The bat out of hell juddered, and my watch flew from its place. As it clattered to the floor, Sarah shouted, "Their ship's coming apart!" I peered in the darkness, and from what I could tell she was right. Something fell away from their hull. As it fell, I noticed the dome of the old stone bank as it careened beneath us, and somehow inferred that something was off. "What time is it?" 10:25 and 12 seconds, she stated confidently. I wasn't so sure. "No, it's not. Synchronize." "Okay." She began a data transfer with time.windows.com, redetermining our time. While she did that, I was still tracking the saucer as they made a wide bank over Narragansett Bay. It looked like they were making another run on Providence, and already having drawn a bead, I took my eyes off the windshield to grab for my pocket watch. I groped around on the floor until I found it. Slightly warm to the touch, subtly warmer than it should have been for just sitting in my pocket all day. After going to place it on the dashboard in order to free both hands to correct course, I noticed it glowing yet again. The face, which was always synchronized with local time, because of connection with time itself, read just a bit past 8. What? As I gaped, it went from glowing to shining, and quickly became too bright. I turned it away from my face, pointing out the window at the Silurian ship, as Sarah echoed my sentiment. "What the hell is going on?" A beam of time shot from the face of the watch and exploded in midair between us and the saucer. There was some sort of insane reaction between the watch's time energy and that of their time drive. A flash in the sky over Providence sent us spiraling back in time yet again. As Sarah tried to answer my question from earlier, and I refuted her answer, telling her to synchronize again, I searched the sky for the saucer. In the flash we'd been separated, the battered hull being ejected from the breach in time at an odd angle, and I had no doubt they suffered the same fate. It turns out that they weren't so lucky. Unable to correct, the 3 pilots ejected onto the State House lawn, while their ship spiraled out of control before a lucky gust of wind righted the saucer. Now without a pilot, the anti-grav units continued uncontrolled. Like a leaf on the wind, it drifted away. But an unmanned UFO was the least of my worries. I didn't know what these guys were here for other than wanting to retake the planet, which was quite a simple motive and common among their people who lived on Earth before the dinosaurs went extinct. But an agreement had been reached nearly a year and a half ago. There was no good reason for these guys to be here now. And why did they have a time ship? There were way too many questions to answer, and 3 Silurians to capture before they made it to the State House, Providence Place Mall, or other public area, and caused mass panic. A landing site was nowhere to be found, so I defaulted to my backup yet again, and tried to come down in the dirt lot, where I had parked, or rather would park later that day. My car was yet to arrive, and as I scoured the area for any sign, a gust pushed the ship low and across, demolishing the chained entranceway and forcing me down in the middle of the patch. At this point, I'm not even sure that I understood exactly what was happening, but I grabbed a coat from a locker and sprinted out of the ship, weapon in hand. Sarah was right behind. Some moments later, we were on the lawn of the State House looking for the green reptile men. There was nobody else in sight, which was not only good to make sure that there was no panicking in the streets, but to make sure that I didn't get seen shooting at aliens by someone I knew, or someone I didn't know. As I shifted through the grass, my luminous girl beside me, there was a rustling in the trees. I had but a moment before a Silurian leapt down and tackled me by the neck. Sarah turned to fire, but shots from across the courtyard forced her to take cover. I beat at the man's scaly skin before rolling and sending him to the ground as well. Reaching over, I found my pistol in the grass and brought it to his neck in one swift motion. His eyes wide at mine, he mouthed something in his natural tongue before shifting his gaze behind me. I saw the third appear from the shadows and assault Sarah, and I knew at once what was coming. My knee flew to his stomach, and I whirled around to face the other attacker. Sensing my attention, he ducked, rolled to cover, and fired. I returned that, nearly severing a tree. Sarah floored the third Silurian. I pulled a gun on the first. Taking fire, we made an unconscious agreement that we simply couldn't keep these guys alive. After delivering a kick in the shin, I shot at the first reptile, and Sarah executed hers. Now there was only the second. There was a pounding on dirt before he came into my vision, swinging. No time to shoot, I blocked the hook and returned with my own, striking him cleanly in the side of the head. I dodged his first kick, but the second connected, toppling me. I rolled away from a stomp, hopped to my feet, and prepared to enter the fray again, before Sarah came charging in and tackled him to the ground. Perhaps we could capture one, after all. No dice. He threw her aside and moved, finally, for his weapon. I took a steady step back, aimed, and neutralized the threat. Was that all of them? Sarah was still poised for combat. Yeah, I think that was all of them. I wiped the grass from my dress pants, which were probably ruined for good. We need to get rid of these bodies. And so we began a trek back up the hill to the Battle of Hell. Checking the watch, it was a touch past 7 o'clock, and my car was there, parked next to the shuttle. Tendrils from the watch reached out to it, and I gave a wide berth as I entered the Battle of Hell's rear hatch. After we finally remembered to shut off the running lights, we landed on the State House lawn, and dragged the 3 Silurian corpses into lockers in the cargo bay. We'd bring these to the SGC to examine later, but for now, we set the lockers to deep freeze, and put the bodies into cryogenic suspension. By the time we were making our moves to leave, having cleaned up any evidence of our gunfight, it was just past 8 again. As if on cue, a triangle of lights, followed by a rectangle, swooped overheads towards the old stone bank, and vanished in a flash. I stared at the space they had been, finally assembling the puzzle. Oh my God, Sarah, I get it. What? It's us! The lights, it's us! I shouted in the night air, a cry of mental victory. It had been puzzling me all night, and now I understood. But there was one mystery yet to unravel. I took off, running. The old stone bank loomed around the corner. I heard the pounding footsteps in the alley, and in my pocket once again. It began to glow. There was a scrape on asphalt, the huffs of a short interchange, and then a solid whap, as his fist impacted my temple. I rounded the corner into the alley as the Silurian drew a knife, ready to kill. I aimed, and hit him square in the chest. He fell over backwards, and I moved to inspect the corpse, passing my own body on the ground. I placed my PP Type 0 on the concrete nearby, and leaned over the dead Silurian, inspecting his combat knife. In doing this, my pocket suddenly became hot. I looked over just in time to see tendrils reaching out from my other self, sparking with my own. I muttered a curse, and still clutching the knife, was thrown about 2 hours into the future. I sprinted out of the alley as I heard Sarah come looking, leaving my weapon behind. The Battle to Hell was still waiting on the State House lawn, and I jumped into the back in time to see the other Sarah begin glowing blue again. "That's us!" I shouted. "Let's go!" And picked the ship off of the ground, circling to stay out of my own view. Now, that alley was empty, and I had to take care of that corpse. As we hovered overhead, Sarah reached out and grabbed it, tugging it up and stowing it in yet another locker. I was trying to remember if we'd gotten them all, and turned to survey the city again. The disc was nowhere to be found, but there were 2 left, although I was unsure how they got there. It struck me that there may have been another ship, or maybe I underestimated the first saucer's crew complement. Nonetheless, when I went for them, they were already dead. The parking lot was empty, and Sarah and I agreed to keep our eyes on the skies from now on. I turned the watch over in my hands. Let's go pick up Darren and Alec. I'm ready for this night to be over. In case by the time you hear this I've never talked about the watch before, the watch itself is actually a time travel device. All you do is hold it and think, and you're there. It has its limits. It has trouble transporting electronic technology. If you use it to transport electronic technology, it breaks things. I believe that only happens if you travel through space with it, though. So if you just travel through time from a certain point, it works. Point is, it's a time travel device. Whatever. Hope you guys enjoyed this. This is one of my favorite stories. It'll be in the description if you want to read it yourself. Some things, of course, may be a little bit different. There were a couple things I need to correct, and that I corrected on the spot. So I'm going to go into my actual copy and fix those and then post it up for you guys to see. Keep on staring out at the stars and watch out for Silurian UFOs.